And so with that, I want to invite my friend Dave Moore up to the stage, and we're going to start the first session. Dave, come on up. Okay. I'm going to switch with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
No hard questions.
No hard questions? So Dave, let me just, so Dave, most people here know who you are, but tell me a little about what you're working on these days and what's going on, and obviously, you know, Dave, as you if you don't know, is chairman of Xaxis and president of WPP Digital. So Dave, what's going on?
Well, as you probably know, there's been a few changes at WPP. And my boss, Mark Reed, which has been my boss since 2007, is now the CEO of the company. And so we had a strategy meeting about 3 weeks ago, and I've been going to these meetings since 2007. And it was the most positive meeting that I've been to in the tenure of my employment there. We have a technology strategy now for the company overall, and one of the partners in one of the WPP Digital companies that we bought some years ago, which was called Acceleration, it's now part of Wonderman, is now the CTO of WPP. So it's a big move, and it allows us to consolidate all the disparate technology efforts that are going on throughout the company. As you may know, we're 130,000 employees. We're in 106 different countries. We have 400 different operating companies. And you know what? Almost all of them have some sort of technology effort underway. So this is going to allow us to consolidate them. And one of the things that I'm very excited about is helping in that effort, because it's not a small undertaking at all. The other thing that I think was a big change, and I won't have much to do with this, but we have a couple branding agencies you may have heard of, Super Brand Union and Landor, and they presented a branding strategy for WPP. Now, in the history of WPP, that was a martin call that we didn't market WPP, that all the companies needed to market themselves. But for the first time, we're going to be marketing WPP as a brand. So between the technology strategy presentation and the branding strategy, you know, all the senior executives of the company gave a standing ovation. And the whole emphasis going forward is to work more together as a team as opposed to these silos. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of work to be done in that regard, and I'm involved in some of it, but not all.
So I mean, I do want to hear a ton about that, just in general. Maybe not here, but I think it's interesting, the transformation of WPP. So So I want to kind of read a list, right? I read a list of kind of, and it's a pretty amazing list of what's happened in 2018. To kind of kick this off, and because what a crazy year it's been. So here's a list, in case you don't remember. AT&T bought Time Warner and AppNexus. Disney bought the assets of Fox. The CBS merger was on again, off again, on again, off again. Sinclair was buying Tribune, but then they didn't. IPG bought Axiom. GDPR happened. The IAB took a position for the first time that they were actually interested in promoting regulation versus a self-regulation only platform. The IAB couldn't stop talking about direct-to-consumer. Martin left WPP. Mark Reed named CEO. Donald Trump remained the president, and CNN stayed in business. So of this list, and this is only in this year, so in this list, what was the most interesting thing that happened, and why do you think so?
Wow. I think they're all fascinating. And in terms of, if you look at the events that you talked about that pertain to media consolidation, I think that there's a general consensus among those players, the Disneys, Comcasts, AT&Ts, and others, that the triopoly has gotten very, very strong. You've got 3 robust walled gardens that are raking in anywhere from 75, depending on what numbers you believe, 75 to 80% of all the digital dollars. That's a lot. And how do you compete against it? In fact, I thought it was ridiculous that it took AT&T so long to get approval to buy Time Warner, given the Google and other competition that are out there. I mean, it was so naive to not let them go ahead. Same thing with the broadcast consolidation. I see no reason why Sinclair couldn't have bought Tribune. It's a whole new world out there.
Was this the craziest year you've seen in the media business?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, the year 2000 was a pretty crazy year, which, took probably 15 years off my life. But what's great about this industry overall is that there's always stuff happening every single day. I mean, you're talking about 4 different press releases today around this area. And I know Mike Xaxis is going to give an overview of his, but it's one of the things that keeps you alive. I mean, between staying mentally active and physically fit, you can live for a long time unless you get hit by a bus or something.
Let's stay talking about future. So, if 10 years ago, though, just kind of set the stage, if 10 years ago the macro concept in media was essentially, if you were going to make an investment macro decision, it was going to be data, right? If you would have put money into pretty much any data business 10 years ago, you would have made money. I mean, if it was programmatic, whether it was a DMP, whether it was a data source, I mean, literally data, 10 years later, you've made a ton of money. So if you take a look at now kind of a macro, what would you put your money in? What's the
Going
next,
forward?
What would be the next 10-year bet?
Well, I think data is still going to be pretty important overall. It's becoming more and more sophisticated overall. And the fact of the matter is we still don't know how to use it as well as we should. And some of you may have heard me tell this story, but I got to tell it one more time. Good friend of mine who unfortunately is no longer with us, by the name of Charlie Stryker, was a data marketing specialist, and he was on my board of directors at 24/7 when we were a public company. And Charlie was an entrepreneur, always saw commercial aspects for data. He was a brilliant entrepreneur. And so he came up with this idea that said, every year in the United States, a certain amount of people that die. And so he decided I'd put together a list of dead people that died last year, 2017, and go to advertisers. And in those days, it was pretty much direct mail, telemarketing, and that sort of thing, and deduplicate the list that they were going to mail to with the dead people, because obviously they're not buying products anymore. And so like any of these data tests, they tested it with a small subsample of the dead and the alive, and guess what? The dead people list performed better. Now, why, we don't know. Maybe it was Aunt Martha is opening Uncle Charlie's mail and thinks this is a special offer. But so things don't always seem to be what they actually are. So I still think we got a long way to go with data in particular. I do believe that content is still going to be very important. And by the way, you talked about data 10 years ago, but had you invested in any of the FANG stocks, it would have been every bit as good as data, maybe even better. I got another story about that, but I'll save it for later. But so the question for the content companies, for them to be viable, and you look at what Disney has compiled now and some of the others, is who's going to make more money on your content? Google, Facebook, or you? So there's a whole, I think, new business paradigm that has to occur for those content companies to be worth some money. And I actually think that they'll be able to do that. So I would make some bets on the big content providers overall. In terms of, let's say, telcos and cable companies and folks like that, they're trying to become content providers right now. They're also thinking about putting up their own walled gardens, which I don't know if that helps us as an industry very much. So I don't know that I would necessarily be betting on them.
Yeah, so speaking of content, I have these business dreams sometimes. Not that many of them, but I had this dream, and I don't wake up remembering all of it, but I kind of remember little sound bites. I had this dream once about trading media. I woke up and it was like, trading media, that's what you got to do. I was like, what? What is that? Anyway, but I also had this dream recently about, and I woke up and the thesis was, the price of content is too low. The price of media is too low. And from what I could piece together, the dream went something like, with all the on-demand content from the YouTubes and all the on-demand content from Netflix and Amazon and more choices and OTT, what it's done is it's distributed the viewership so much that and it's also created more opportunities for actors and just tons of content in the world, that it's depressed the price of the media so much. And what you're seeing here, potentially with some of these companies like the AT&Ts and the Verizons buying, is actually they see it, and they see this opportunity to buying these companies for cheap. And really, we should be investing in media right now. So what do you think about that?
Well, I always like the term premium content. Really, what is premium content? Well, a lot of people say, well, Facebook is not premium content because it's user-generated and costs almost nothing to produce. But is the right ad in front of the right person at the right time nested in user-generated content? Is that ad really compelling? I think it is. Now, is it more compelling if the environment surrounds it? So if it's a financial ad, that it's in financial content and the consumer's mindset is thinking that way, definitely impactful. However, more impactful. However, the issue is what's the delta between what you pay for the Facebook inventory versus what you pay for the, financial content, peer-reviewed, great stuff. And unfortunately, the delta is an 8x. Yeah, it's probably 2x, which is still 100% more impact. But that's been the problem that the premium content companies have. And I kid around and say premium content means that you're spending more on content than you can support with advertising. Now, there's a couple other areas that I would invest in.
Yeah.
And, good applications of artificial intelligence. And it's just starting, there's 4 different levels of it. Starts with machine learning and progresses up to there. And the only thing about it is I do agree with Elon Musk and Bill Gates and others. I think it's more dangerous than a nuclear bomb. And the reason I think that way is because all the bad guys and bad women have artificial intelligence and are working on applications that aren't going to be good for any of us. So I worry about that, but there's going to be a slew of artificial intelligence applications that I think are going to be very compelling. In fact, I had breakfast with a fellow that's going to lead a discussion group at one of the WPP stream conferences, and he's come up with a title called, "Is It Humane for Humans to Do a Computer's Work?" which I thought was kind of interesting. And whenever there's progress, people get displaced. The other 2 areas that I think are going to be very interesting too is augmented reality and virtual reality. And we're just in the infancy right now. Headsets are still very expensive. They haven't really solved what I would call seasickness aspect of being able to watch an hour in virtual reality. But my prediction on virtual reality is going to be based on what drove the adoption of the VCR, as well as some of the first streaming uses of video on the internet, and that is pornography.
Yeah, we had an interesting conversation last night about politics. And I'm going to close on this thought.
The blue wave.
Blue wave. We'll talk at the end of the day. We're going to talk about
Blue
politics.
is my favorite color,
but
I must
we had an
say.
interesting conversation when we talked to a journalist who said, when I covered Stormy Daniels, we had to say former porn star Stormy Daniels, and now that got flagged for contextual irrelevancy because of the word porn. And so there's a whole interesting conversation from this afternoon. So anyway, Dave, I got to sum it up here. Thanks so much. Final thought. What's your final thought? Future of media.
Well, it's very exciting. And as long as I've been in the industry, I will tell you that it hasn't gotten less exciting. I think it's gotten more exciting as I've gotten older. So the future is great. I'm happy to be in it. I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to all of you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Thank you. Good job.